If you open a satellite map of southern Japan, just off the port city of Nagasaki, you will see a cluster of small islands in the middle of the sea. Some of the islands are resorts, others are completely empty. But one island stands out, not because of its natural beauty or luxury resorts, but because it resembles a ghost town in the middle of the ocean. Hashima. From above, Hashima appears as a block of gray concrete, the ruins of high-rise buildings now deserted, not a single person in sight. What's special is that you can access Google Street View here, drop in a pin, and walk around the dilapidated streets feeling the eerie atmosphere like a post-apocalyptic movie. There are no residents, no sounds, just collapsed buildings eroded by time. But don't let the desolate appearance fool you. Hashima is more than just a deserted island. It holds a rich history of industrial development, imperialism, world wars, and the unhealed wounds of regional relations. Though now a ruined, Hashima was once a symbol of ambition, modernization, and tragedy. The name Gunkanjima, meaning Battleship Island, is no coincidence, as the island's shape when viewed from afar resembles a giant steel battleship lying motionless in the middle of the ocean. In the late 19th century, Japan entered the Meiji Restoration period, a period of transformation from a feudal state to an industrial power. In this wave of modernization, energy became a vital factor, and in 1810, coal reserves were discovered on Hashima Island deep under the sea. However, it was not until 1887 that mining really began on a large scale, when the Mitsubishi Corporation, one of the largest enterprises in Japan at the time, bought the entire island and turned it into a closed industrial complex specializing in coal mining to serve the system of factories and the rapidly growing fleet of steamships. In just a few decades, coal production on Hashima skyrocketed, reflecting the boom of Japanese industry. In 1874, the entire country's coal production was only about 200,000 tons. But by 1919, that number had risen to over 30 million tons, and Hashima played a significant role. To meet the growing demand, Mitsubishi continued to expand the island. They used the mine's own slag to reclaim land and build artificial land, expanding Hashima by thousands of square meters. But Hashima was more than just a coal mine. It became a miniature industrial city. Every inch of land was used. Instead of farming, all food and clean water were shipped in from the mainland. On the expanded land, Mitsubishi built apartment buildings, schools, hospitals, cinemas, and even entertainment facilities like pachinko parlors, serving the thousands of workers and their families who lived right on the island. All of this was surrounded by a solid concrete wall built to protect the island from rough waves and storms, a testament to Japan's limitless industrial ambitions at the time. Hashima, a remote coal mine, has become a living symbol of Japan's industrialization, where development is pushed to the extreme limit and each piece of coal under the sea is exchanged for labor and human life. By the 1930s, Hashima was no longer simply a coal mining center. As the Japanese Empire expanded and entered a series of conflicts in Asia, notably the invasion of Manchuria in 1931 and full-scale war with China from 1937, the demand for energy, especially coal to power warships, military factories, and weapons production, skyrocketed, and Hashima, with its well-developed seabed coal mining system, became a vital cog in Japan's war machine. The peak came in 1941, the year Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and officially entered World War II. In that year, coal production at Hashima peaked more than 410,000 tons in a single year, according to data released by Mitsubishi and Japanese industrial records. This huge amount of coal was shipped directly to Mitsubishi's shipbuilding and armaments factories, including warships and military aircraft for the Imperial Japanese Army. Hashima's location near Nagasaki also made it directly involved in some of the most tragic events in modern history. On August 9, 1945, just 3 days after the US dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, the second bomb, Fat Man, fell on Nagasaki, just 20 kilometers away from Hashima. In the following days, many workers and equipment from Hashima were urgently mobilized to participate in the rescue and cleanup of the rubble in Nagasaki, making the fate of the island even more closely linked to the country's historical turning point. After Japan's surrender, the country entered a period of reconstruction with support from the United States. Rather than being left behind in the war's past, Hashima once again played an important role in the post-war economic recovery. When the Korean War broke out in 1950, Japan became a logistics base and a manufacturing base for the Allies. Energy demand continued to rise, and once again, coal from Hashima became a strategic economic resource, contributing significantly to the Japanese economic miracle of the 1950s-1960s. By 1959, Hashima had reached its peak population of over 5,200 residents living in an area of just 6.3 hectares, making it the most densely populated area in Japan's history, a floating city operating virtually independently and a symbol of a powerful revival from the ruins of war. By the 1970s, Hashima's boom began to slow down. Not because of war or natural disasters, but because of a global change, the energy revolution. As oil replaced coal as the primary energy source, the role of coal mines like Hashima gradually became obsolete. Japan, along with many other industrialized countries, began a strong shift to using liquid fossil fuels, which were more efficient and easier to mine. This was an irreversible trend. At Hashima, coal reserves had begun to decline after decades of continuous mining. At the same time, operating costs were rising, making it less efficient to bring coal from the seabed to the surface compared to other open-pit mines on land. Faced with a deteriorating economic situation, Mitsubishi, the sole owner of the island, officially announced the closure of the mine in January 1974. The deadline was only 3 months for all residents and workers to evacuate the island. In April 1974, the last ship left Hashima port, carrying the last residents and closing a chapter in history that had lasted nearly a century. Since then, Hashima has become a completely abandoned island. With no one living there, no purpose for mining the entire infrastructure. From houses, schools, hospitals to engineering works, was exposed to the sea windstorms and time. It is worth noting that Mitsubishi still owns the land but has absolutely no responsibility for maintaining or protecting the works. As a result, concrete buildings began to collapse, roofs crumbled, stairs crumbled, and many places became extremely dangerous. The once bustling city has now become a ghost town, swallowed by time, where the silence and ruins evoke a strange feeling, both gloomy and attractive. This has attracted the dark tourism community, people who are passionate about exploring abandoned, creepy, or historically tragic places. Although the Japanese government banned access to Hashima for decades, after its closure, some filmmakers, photographers, and adventurous tourists still managed to sneak onto the island to capture rare and strange images. Hashima has since become a symbol of industrial decline, featured in many works of art and films, most notably the film Skyfall James Bond 2012, where Hashima was inspired to build the villain's lair. But hidden behind those cinematic scenes is a cold truth. The place that was once a symbol of Japanese industry is now just a relic of an irreversible past. After nearly 3 decades of complete abandonment, Hashima finally entered a new chapter, no longer a coal mining center, but a special tourist destination. In 2009, the Japanese government officially allowed visitors to set foot on the island through organized tours. A new wharf and a system of safe passageways were built on the relatively unspoiled southern part of the island. As a result, Hashima was not only reopened, but also became a unique source of tourism revenue, especially for history buffs and those interested in mysterious places. At the same time, Japan pushed ahead with plans to nominate Hashima as a UNESCO World Heritage Site as part of the Industrial Revolution sites in Kyushu and Yamaguchi. If recognized, Hashima would receive international legal protection, helping to preserve the island's relics and enhance the national image. From a cultural and tourism perspective, the proposal makes perfect sense. However, as soon as the dossier was published, a wave of strong opposition immediately erupted from South Korea, North Korea, and China. The reason is not only because Hashima used to be a coal mine, but because the island is associated with a dark chapter in history that Japan is accused of deliberately avoiding wartime forced labor. According to many historical documents and accounts from living witnesses from the late 1930s to 1945, thousands of Koreans and Chinese were forced to work on Hashima under extremely harsh conditions. These workers, mostly teenagers or prisoners of war, were brought here to make up for the shortage of labor when Japanese men went to war. They had to work up to 12 hours a day in hot, humid, suffocating underground environments with no safety measures and almost no escape because the entire island was surrounded by concrete walls and the sea. While the above countries demanded that Japan publicly acknowledge the forced labor history at Hashima if it wanted to be recognized as a heritage site, Japan initially avoided the issue, leading to years of diplomatic tension. It was not until 2015, under international pressure, that Japan reached an agreement with South Korea, agreeing to include information about forced labor in its tourist display system. Thanks to that, Hashima was officially recognized as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO that same year. However, shortly after achieving recognition, Japan was accused of subtly backtracking on its commitment. The Industrial Information Center in Tokyo, which was supposed to display information about Hashima's history, only provided a diplomatic video in English without Japanese subtitles and made almost no explicit mention of Korean or Chinese victims. This has caused outrage in the international community, especially historical and human rights organizations who believe that Japan is obscuring its painful past to serve tourism goals and national image. Beneath Hashima's cold concrete surface lies a truth that many Japanese have never heard. It was a forced labor camp during World War II. Official narratives often ignore this fact, but international historical documents and first-hand accounts from victims tell a different story. One of the survivors was Soo Jung-woo, a Korean who was forced to come to Hashima when he was 14 years old. In his memoir, he describes seeing the island for the first time, not as a modern city, but as a prison in the middle of the sea surrounded by high concrete walls with no way out. Inside, he was locked in a cramped room with 6 or 7 others forced to work 12 hours a day in a mine that was swelteringly hot, humid, and lacking oxygen. There was no protective gear, no basic medical care, and the danger of collapsing rocks and soil could bury anyone alive. Many did not survive the months of work there. And what was even more cruel was that the dead were not brought back. Instead, according to accounts, their bodies were taken to nearby Gunkanjima Island to be cremated with black smoke rising every day as a vivid warning to those left behind. For years, the Japanese government systematically denied allegations of forced labor at Hashima. Although international documents, records from the International Military Tribunal in Tokyo, and UNESCO all address the issue, the content displayed at the Official Information Center in Tokyo hardly reflects historical reality. The only video recording Japan's indirect acknowledgement is broadcast in English without Japanese subtitles, making it difficult for the domestic public to fully access the information. This raises the big question: can heritage recognition be separated from historical responsibility? The lack of transparency in the information display has been strongly criticized by many international human rights organizations and scholars who believe that Japan is deliberately replaying history in a way that benefits the national image instead of honestly facing the truth. Although relations between Japan and South Korea are gradually improving on the surface through economic security and diplomatic cooperation, wartime wounds such as Hashima still smolder. For many Koreans and Chinese, Hashima is not a normal tourist destination, but a symbol of a period of invasion, exploitation, and silence imposed on its victims. Many former forced laborers and their relatives are still calling for Japan to fully acknowledge its responsibility and issue a formal apology rather than evading or making excuses. Several civil cases have been filed in both Japan and South Korea, although the results remain controversial. The existence of Hashima as a UNESCO heritage site, while its victims have not been properly commemorated, continues to be a thorny issue in the Northeast Asian regional dialogue on reconciliation. It shows that even a small island can carry considerable political and moral weight. What do you think about Japan's handling of historical memories at Hashima? Leave a comment below to discuss. If you find this video valuable, don't forget to like, share, and follow the channel so you don't miss other authentic historical stories. Thank you for watching until the end of the video.